believe it wasn't an inside job. And the fact of the matter is that whether or not it was, the Twin Towers, the financial symbols of capitalism, came tumbling down, and General Headquarters was whacked. However it happened, it happened. And what we're saying now is that as we move into 2010 and we look at the United States foreign policy, they're setting us up between NATO and the U.S. for a wave of reprisal attacks. It's not they hate our freedom and liberty. How about looking at the current events forming future trends? And day after day, week after week, you hear about Predator missiles hitting in Pakistan and Afghanistan and other areas and killing scores of people. You look at the United States foreign policy relative to Pakistan and the increase in troop involvement via the U.S. foreign policy in the Swat Valley in South Waziristan. They have the greatest refugee crisis going on there since Rwanda in 1994. Now, let's put it into perspective. Unlike Afghan and Iraqis, very few of them live in the United States. We have over 300,000 Pakistanis living in the USA. And we also saw the effects of a lone wolf gunman in the Fort Hood incident. Now, let's suppose for a moment that you're a Pakistani and your family was wiped out in South Waziristan, Swat Valley, or from some other Predator missile or whatever attack. Would you want to seek revenge if your community was destroyed, livelihoods, families, friends? That's the kind of thing we're looking at in 2010. We're also looking at breaking point elements happening in Afghanistan and Iraq, where terror is also a great probability against NATO countries. Also, there's more and more talk as we go into this new year of Israel again attacking Iran to take out their nuclear facilities, and the United States exerting more sanctions upon the Iranians. Should this happen, we're going to see the beginning of World War III. If anybody thinks they're going to wipe out Iran, they better read their history books and learn about the Persians. They've been around a long time. They're not going anywhere. So these are the things we're concerned about. We're saying them because when you go back to 2000, I was prepared for it. One of the first things I did was try to get my CDs out of the bank because I live right north of Ground Zero. And I know where the Indian Point nuclear power plant is, just 45 miles north of that. And if they hit that nuclear power plant, we would have seen chaos that no one's ever seen before. I was ready to head to Canada. But when I tried to get my CDs out of Fleet Bank, which no longer exists, they told me that your CDs or financial instruments traded on Wall Street, and Wall Street's closed. You won't be able to get your money out until Wall Street opens. If we have a 9/11 terrorist strike, we're going to see bank closings in high probability. And when that happens, yeah, you'll get your money out, but maybe just a little bit at a time. And let's be adults here for a moment. The FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, they're broke. They're looking to get money from banks to push them forward. They have to give 3 years in forward remuneration just to keep the FDIC going. So if that happens, count on a dollar devaluation or any other currency devaluation. And when that happens, for example, and you look back when they've done it before, when they call a bank holiday, I love the language, holiday, how more Orwellian could it be? What they did, of course, they confiscated the people's gold, they made the people sell it to the U.S. Treasury at $20.67 an ounce, and then when they reopened the banks, they also raised the benchmark price of gold to $35. So in effect what they did was they devalued the money 40%. Those are the kind of things we're worried about, and that's what we're looking for in that area.
So, okay, so one of the trends is terrorism 2010. Another trend that you have for next year is the crash of 2010. Let's talk about that.
Well, we had forecast in 2008 that we would see the collapse of 2009. And, of course, in 2007, we predicted the panic of 2008. We did have the collapse of 2009. It happened in March of 2009. The world equity markets collapsed. And all they've been doing is they've prevented them from hitting the ground by propping them up with trillions of dollars worth of phantom money printed out of thin air, backed by nothing and producing nothing. And they've done this throughout the world. Central banks from Australia to China, from the UK to the US, you name it, they've been dumping trillions in Europe alone, 5.3 trillion. And what the scheme is this. What they do is the central banks loan commercial banks money, and the commercial banks give them as collateral their mortgage-backed securities and other assets. Let's call it junk. They have nothing. They have worthless paper. And that's not worth the digital paper it's printed on. So what we're going to see now is the stimulus money running out in 2010. The European Union has already said they're not going to continue to throw more money in. And as we know in the U.S., they're going to have to unwind at some point, and already interest rates are at near zero. And let's also go back to 2000, and let's make another analogy. After 9/11, the first thing the Federal Reserve did, just days after, was begin to lower interest rates to reprime the economy, because we were in a recession then. Well, we're still in a recession, but now we're at zero interest rates. They can't lower them anymore. So we're looking for the crash of 2010. The game is going to be over. Who knows what scheme undreamed of they'll come along with to try to prop it up once more. But even that's not going to save the day. You need a productive capacity. You just can't print money.
Now, along those lines, you have another theme called a depression uplift, the pursuit of elegance and affordable sophistication.
Well, again, the world doesn't come to an end, but of course it might if they continue to go in this foreign policy direction they are. But absent of that, when you look back to the Great Depression, we had the happiest, hottest music this country's ever seen. People dressed up to the nines. The sloppy look was out, the upscale look was in. If you didn't have two nickels to rub together, you try to look the best you could, particularly at a time when people are going to be fighting for employment. They're going to want to put the best face on forward. So we're going to look at a whole elegance trend start to reemerge. And when we talk about affordable sophistication, the people in business should understand that quality is going to reign supreme. Average isn't going to make it. So, for example, if you're running a restaurant, any kind of coffee shop, whatever the business might be, smaller portions, higher quality, quality counts. We're going into a whole new direction where bigger is not better. So elegance is going to make a play not only in fashion, food, but also in entertainment. It's going to become a statement once again.
I want to talk about an interesting trend you call neo-survivalism. Explain that one.
Well, you know, when you go back to the last depressing days when we were in a survival mode, the last one, the Y2K, of course, before that in the 1970s, what had happened was that you only saw this one element of survivalist, you know, the caricature of the guy with the AK-47 heading to the hills with enough ammunition and pork and beans to ride out the storm. This is a very different one from that. You're seeing average people taking smart moves and moving in intelligent directions to prepare for the worst. Only somebody living in delusion and filled with hope, which is one of the most empty words in the metaphysical dictionary, thinks that real change is going to happen. So survivalism in every way possible, growing at your own, self-sustaining, doing as much as you can to make it as best as you can on your own. And it could happen in an urban area, suburban area, or the ex-urbans. And it also means becoming more and more tightly committed to your neighbors, your neighborhood, working together and understanding that we're all in this together, and that when we help each other out, that's going to be the best way forward.
I want to talk about another trend that you have for next year, Not Welcome Here, because this is a very growing trend that we see here in Southern California, where we're close to the border, because illegal immigration has been bankrupting the state of California. Let's talk about Not Welcome Here.
Well, Not Welcome Here is not only going to be in California, it's worldwide. Let's just look at some numbers and stay with the facts. It took 100,000 years to put 1.5 billion people on a planet to 1900. Think about it. 100,000 years ago to 1900 to put 1.5 billion people on the planet. In 100 years, we've added 5 billion people. There is no such thing as a population expert. Nobody's ever dealt with these numbers before. There's not enough jobs. There's not enough resources to go around. So what's going to happen is that all of those countries around the world that brought in cheap labor to build